Welcome back to On the Soul's Terms. I'm joined again today by the astrologer Melanie Reinhart as we enter the soulful depth of the 8th house. As Melanie tells us, it's a house that Dane Rudhyar associated with the word renewal. Perhaps a big part of that renewal process is recovering the energy we spend running from what we are afraid of as we face it here in the 8th. But also it's the Asclepian process of incubation, of listening to our dreams, and of tunneling down to where things are dark and quiet that helps us to connect to our essential life force. It's an episode that I've sparsely edited this time as I find the pauses and gaps in our speech to also tell us much about what is down here in the House of the Mysteries. We recorded this episode on the same night as we recorded our talk on the 4th house, and so we're already down in that watery space from the start. In good news, Melanie has agreed to come back on the pod to talk on the 12th house in a few months' time, so be sure to tune in for that one. Thanks for listening, and here is my chat with Melanie Reinhart in the 8th house. Always a pleasure. It really, truly is a deep pleasure to be joined by Melanie Reinhart for this episode. Welcome, Melanie.
Oh, thank you, Chris. I always look forward to our conversations. I really do.
Me too. And so last time we met, we were in the 4th, wandering around at the threshold of the IC and into this realm of ancestry, familial patterns, establishing ourselves down there, as Rudhyar suggests. And now I'm very excited to be entering the 8th with you.
Likewise.
And, well, I mean, how do two people enter the 8th house? How shall we approach this house? Where to begin?
That is a really good question. And I think that certainly in my own life and in the lives of plenty of people whose life journey I've been privileged to witness a little bit of, sometimes, it's like we see that doorway marked 8th house. And we go, no, no, please, no, not that.
Yeah.
No. And so we may get, as it were, snatched by circumstances or by another person and kind of dragged there, sometimes kicking and screaming all the way. But it is a house of very deep mysteries, associated in the tradition with death, looked at in a more holistic and psychological way. The deaths that the 8th house refers to are not necessarily the end of our life and the death of our physical body, although it can feel like that's where it's going. But it can be actually a whole series, taking our life as a whole series of kind of mini deaths, all of which can feel like this is it. This is the final one. I'm done for, I'm gone, I'm finished, etc. It can feel like that. But when it's the death of a way of life, so a change of phase in our life, from leaving school to going out into the world, or retiring towards the end of our life. So any major transition, the two principal ones being birth and death, it is also the mini deaths in between. So associated with a lot of letting go, and sometimes with the reluctance to do so. And these can be really subtle things, like letting go of an old self-image. And that can be very renewing That's Dane Rudyard's word for the eighth house, is to renew. So letting go of an old self-image happens through a process where we might not even know what's happening to us, except it feels like the light went out, we feel dark or heavy or even a bit scared. We don't quite know what's happening. And then if we endeavor to stay tuned in the eighth house, its secrets, I'm going to say, may well in time be revealed. You say, oh, I realize, I'm no longer that person who I thought I was, or who I used to be, or that persona, that mask that I once identified with. That's gone. And sometimes we need to mourn these subtle things in the place of the eighth house, so to speak. And so it can be associated with loss. That can be literal, obvious, and can also be subtle and invisible. But the impact on our experience is that it is a loss.
Yeah, and as you were speaking there, I was thinking, I noticed that the question was, how do we approach the eighth?
Yeah.
And it is, you know, it's been a really meaningful time for me to learn about the mysteries, because you've mentioned mysteries and secrets a lot, and the ancient mysteries like Eleusis, that goes back and forward. This was the mystery of basically following Persephone's journey and Demeter's myth and hymn through the journey to the underworld and the grieving process, the loss, a 9-day process guided by priests and priestesses of the cult of Demeter. And so many of the ancient names that we know went through this, but all sworn to secrecy. So although we know of the cult, we know of the mystery, we know parts of it, that you're going down to the underworld and you're facing your deepest, darkest fears. You're coming face to face with the intensity of that and your own death. And we know that when people would come back from this, they would feel the renewal as far as a release, in a sense, from, which is a bit like renewal in the release, like a new lease on life, because of that facing of the thing that you spend so much time trying to avoid.
Yes. Yes, absolutely. And referring to your question again about how do we approach the eighth house, it's something about, if we know that we're actually being led to the eighth house. Now, we might know that because we know enough astrology to know that maybe we've got transits coming up that are going to activate our eighth house. Or we might just have the felt sense of kind of a feeling of dread even, or we might have dreams which indicate a journey to that place. Then it's like that place is looking to be honored in some way.
Yeah.
And that we can do. That can mean something very simple, like setting some time aside to devote to that part of our upcoming journey. Not that you can kind of necessarily condense it down to a couple of days taken out of your schedule or over a weekend or something. Because you can't control it in that way. Because part of its signature is the feeling of loss of control. but we can enter a kind of ritual sacred space that we can create in our home or outside in nature, in our garden, or we can visit a place like a church or a chapel or a favorite tree, but a place that's holy for us, and sort of wait on the experience, maybe with our journal. Probably we won't initially be able to figure out what's going on, even with our journal. But we attend to it, we wait on it, and see what emerges. Certainly, reading the story of Persephone's descent into the underworld, or other famous stories of descent, that can nourish our imaginal sense of where it is that we're headed. Now, that's not it, because the experience itself will arise in its own way, but it can kind of get the territory ready to receive our own eighth house experience.
Almost like we need to do enough of a participation with the eighth so that we can then be taken on that journey, right? So I think like one eighth house moment I had recently, because I was going through what felt like a really significant, it was during the eclipse, actually, the lunar eclipse. And it was all occurring and coming to a head. And so as you had said, when we were talking about Inanna and her journey, I heard the call of the underworld, right?
Yeah.
And nearby where I live, there's some steps that go down to the river, and it was about 150 steps. So it's quite a journey to get down there. And then there was the river, and I just had like a candle, and that was about it. Like I just thought I'll light a candle, and that was sort of enough, and I'd be by the river. And then when I got there, it was actually by a temple. I didn't realize there was a temple there too. And that was enough for the journey to, once I had entered with just those little things and I had a plan, then the plan fell away and the actual process began to happen through synchronicities, through little interactions with nature, moments. When I was walking back up from that, there was an enormous snake, a black and yellow snake. So how's that for, firstly, scary, because those are the dangerous ones here, but also black and yellow being like black and gold in the sense of the alchemical process of lead into gold. And so then I felt this participation begin to happen. And then I was taken into an altered state and on the journey. But firstly, I just needed to almost like flirt with the underworld a bit, like kind of say, yes. I'm willing to interact, and just that willingness is an invitation. And then you start to get taken on a journey. And honestly, the journey was very soulful and beautiful and very moving and touching. And I felt tears. Yeah. It was like I felt tears from so deep, like the really gooey tears, as they came through my eyes. They felt like a really replenishing of the eye, because it was how there's all like different kinds of tears. I had accessed some tears that had a lot of healing in them. This thick goo was sort of coming through. And it was actually about, I felt so blessed at the renewal, exactly that. It felt like the message or the feeling was about renewal, but of course the terrifying fear, the panic of going there is just as real. It's still real. The feeling of terror is always a part of the journey, because it is those two things. I guess the Dionysian world, in Dionysus's sense, it's the agony and the ecstasy, and Dionysus being one of the fields that lead us there in a way.
Yeah. Listening to you, I'm reminded of a period of time, gosh, some decades ago now, when I learned about the healing sanctuaries of Asclepius, the Asclepions. And in those healing sanctuaries, people would go there having been called by a dream of the god, and they would arrive at the Asclepion, and they had to wait outside until they had a dream of Asclepius, which could have been in one of his theriomorphic or animal forms, namely a snake, like your story, or a dog. And once they'd had that dream, they were taken into the main part of the temple where they would sleep. And they would sleep and sleep and sleep until the god, Asclepius, brought them healing through a dream. So I'd want to say, don't underestimate the power of sleeping and dreaming, because sometimes a dream can come which is not something that you then need to journal for hours and take it to your therapist or whatever, discuss it with friends, in order to figure out what it means and what it's telling you. But it's like, whoa, the dream itself brings the healing. And on that occasion, you can feel that right down into the cells of your body. And so there's not necessarily an additional meaning to the dream that you have to find out. The dream itself is the meaning. And that can be very powerful. And that's not actually that unusual. So, in a way, almost going down into sleep, and you'll know if you're feeling called into that kind of a process, because you might feel, you can't keep your eyes open. It's like, then you're going to, what's the matter with me? I'm so tired. My God, I better go to the doctor, find out what's wrong with me, etc. Now, it may be just that you're being called into that world, to enter which you need to be asleep. And I've had a lot of people reporting exactly that. And there was a whole cult devoted to that.
And I learned recently it's sort of like a folk etymology of Asclepius, that the ass is health, and the klepion is like klepto is stealing. So it's a thieving of the health. So where are we heading to thieve that? Like, where do we go to thieve our health in psychological sense, right?
Wow, well, into the night world.
Into the night world, yeah. So I like that. It's not verified because it's a pre-Greek language. It's probably from Thessaly.
Okay.
But still, that klepion is you could imagine that as being the thief, and the thieving from the night world, your health. And if we spend too much time in the day world, it's kind of like that, right? This is again the underworld, where if we're spending too much time in the upper world, we're not really, like, we're using our energy pack while we're up in the conscious world, and we need to go back down to the unconscious world in order to retrieve that, to recharge.
Yeah, to renew, as Rudyard said.
Yeah. Or I like the idea because it's quite an evocative image of thieving, going down there. And it's not just a case of that it'll happen, because many of us have had many nights sleep where we don't have Asclepian dreams, and there's no dog or snake or Asclepius involved, and we wake up groggy and, or, you know, like just, but then I think in the audience, you can ask yourself, if you had this, I certainly remember some very significant ones where I've gone into that. It's not just going to sleep, right? It is going to sleep, but it's not just going to sleep. And that's why I like the thieving of health. It's almost like it implies that there's some participation of yours with the dream, right?
Yeah.
If you have to be the thief in there, then you have to sort of sleuth it out. You know, you have to kind of like go in and have a good look around and sort of like find where the healing might be hidden and uncover it or discover it.
Yeah.
It's kind of a fun idea, and gives us a bit about the hermetic side of underworld as well, given that Hermes is the thief, and he's able to, or the only god given full access to the underworld and the upper world and every world, essentially. But specifically for the underworld, he's the one that can go down there and come back. I mean, there are others like Iris and Hecate as well. But Hermes was the only one in the pantheon that was able to have free passage. And so maybe it's him that can help you.
I was thinking about Hermes as you were speaking. And to me, this makes a whole lot of sense, because if you think of the symbols for Pluto, who would be naturally associated with the 8th house, and Mercury, they're actually identical, except the half moon that represents soul. In the symbol of Mercury, it's at the top of the symbol. And in the symbol for Pluto, it's kind of slipped down to the middle part of the symbol.
Yeah, true.
And to me, there's a kind of wondrous connection, actually, between those two. And as you mentioned, it's only really Hermes who has free right of passage all the way up to Olympus and all the way down into the underworld. And so having Hermes as a kind of a companion on our journey to the underworld, whatever it is that takes us there, and whether or not we were agreeing to go, maybe Hermes is the best possible companion. And that reminds me of that same period of my life that I referred to, where I decided that I would paint myself through, or no, not paint myself as in that, but make a series of paintings of my own imaginal journey into an Asclepion.
Wow.
And so I painted myself leaning up against a column, sort of sitting with my knees up, but sitting on the ground, with head sort of down, indicating that I was sleeping and waiting for the call of the god. And I kid you not, what happened was I got up to make a cup of tea in the middle of while I was doing this painting. And when I got back, there was a huge white blob over the figure that I painted as me, sitting there waiting to be called by the god. And then this huge blob appeared. And to this day, I don't know how it happened. Maybe I unwittingly flicked my paintbrush on the way to standing up and going to get a cup of tea. I don't know. But to me, in that kind of altered state, I thought, oh, oh, looks like I've been called. Because there it came, you see.
Right.
And then went on into the next stage. And I at the time, I thought, oh, so Hermes has come to give me a sign. And kind of watching out for signs like that that might occur on the journey. I think that's a very eighth house kind of a thing, because it is also one of the houses that deal with things hidden or secret. In fact, in different ways, all of the water houses, 4, 8, and 12, they all deal with that.
Yeah, I was thinking about it. In the underworld, there's those rivers or lakes, Lethe and Mnemosyne, right? So there's also
Yes.
places of remembering and forgetting.
Yes.
And it's a curious thing because it's worth sort of sitting with those places, because there can be such a mercy in forgetting, in a way, or the ability to go down and bathe and forget, which can actually lead to the sort of remembering at a more cellular level, a sort of a remembering that's perhaps the deepest level of remembering of who we really are and what we came for. Because
because some eighth house experiences, they can feel very extreme.
Yeah.
And sometimes, again, it's difficult to get words on them or to put any kind of order on the experience. But as it moves through its own sequence, there can come a point where it's like you're being delivered back into the upper world with the feeling of, oh, thank God that's over.
Mm-hmm.
And it might be that you'll never be able to explain fully what that actually is.
Right.
And that's when we cross the river Lethe, then there is a forgetting, a benign forgetting. Don't need to carry, because like the boat, we've been on a boat, let's say, over the river Lethe, and when we get out at the other side, we don't have to carry the boat with us. That can be let go. I very strongly associate the eighth house with some other dimensional things. And that can certainly include our connection with the ancestors. So in the fourth house, by contrast, we may be unknowingly immersed in aspects of our ancestry without it being clear or conscious. And by contrast, in the eighth house, it may happen that we're called to a more specific communication with one or more of our ancestors. So it's like the depth of relationship, which is a key eighth house theme in itself, is extended into other dimensions. In this case, the spirit world. And in my observation anyway, with my own process and people I've met or done readings for, the sense of there being another world where the ancestors live is actually very natural to a lot of people. It's just that most of us have been raised within philosophical and religious or even political frameworks where that doesn't exist. That's dead and gone. It doesn't exist in any real way. And yet what I also see is that we are going through a period where there's a lot of subtle perception opening up about exactly this sort of thing. So there, our sense of relationality and communication in the eighth house, it extends to other domains or additional domains than just the daylight social world. And that can include other kinds of communication with the animal world, with the natural energies of the earth, the energies of place, of the elements, etc. And also plants. So it's like the world that we live in expands in a very particular way in the eighth house. We kind of go over the boundaries. We're taken over the boundaries. It's not a heroic journey in the eighth house. We're taken there, sometimes forcefully and sometimes with incredible tenderness and grace. But it is as if we're taken there. And this whole other world of different energies and different perceptions can await us in the eighth house.
Yeah, it's interesting. Most of the entrance points at least in the ancient Greek world, to the underworld were in caves.
Yeah.
And you go through the cave. There's often a guardian, threshold guardian, a monster of some kind that would be repelling you and pushing you back. Because it is necessarily a terrifying, scary place. And so you'd have to be willing to go through the cave, right? Which in a sense is willing to turn the world upside down from the world that you've known and enter the cave where you don't know exactly where this is going to go anymore. I think it's that transition, which is why in the mysteries there was the initiation into the mysteries so that you could enter. And that was such a pivotal part of the ancient world, so much so that even many centuries after Christianity had taken over, this was still a ritual that was maintained for several centuries post, Constantinople and everything that happened there. It was very hard to stop people from doing this because it was so deeply meaningful for so many people, and so many had gone through it, and it was so real. It's not, I think what I love about the eighth house and the consciousness that leads there is that it's not lofty, like it's the opposite of that. And it's not seeking the bliss states and this joyful, it's actually going the opposite direction. But then oddly enough, what you find there, even in Chinese medicine, grief and joy are linked to each other, right? So through the lungs, and if you go into the grief, which is ultimately following the hymn to Demeter, which is her story, is just a grieving story. If you're able to go deeply into that, then what's discovered down there is that joy. But that can't be the reason you go, or else the trickster, maybe Hermes, who's going to lead you there, will lead you somewhere else, right? If you go with the intention of getting that joy, getting that, there has to be a soulful recognition that, no, I'm not going for that. I'm going to come face to face with deep, dark places of grief, of loss, of pain. That's why I go. But then the mysteries and the secrets embedded in there is that it's the suggestion that also down here, back to the word renewal.
Absolutely. And, you know, it's a journey that we can't contrive.
Yeah.
We can't, like, one day decide, well, it'd be a good idea to take an 8th house journey and try to set that up.
Yeah.
It's not quite how it works in the 8th house. It is something which occurs over which we don't have the kind of managerial control that many of us like to have in our life. But we are invited there or taken there. And as you were talking there, Chris, I sort of thought, well, you know, a lot of spiritual practice and self-development work and that kind of thing can perhaps usefully be thought of as preparation for an 8th house journey. It helps us be ready when those kinds of experiences come, because they will come to everybody in one way or another. So there are a few things which kind of tend to at least take us to the door of the 8th house.
Yeah.
And sometimes even fling us in, so we didn't even realize we went through a door, but there we are in it. And one of them is deep relationships. Now, it's significant the 8th house follows on from the 7th house. And there are some relationships we have that stay on a sort of 7th house level. And they can be very enriching, friendships, partnerships, loverships, whatever. But if the 8th house becomes activated in a relationship, a whole other dimension of intimacy happens. Now, for some people, the threshold crossing is through a sexual exchange, but not necessarily. You know, it's possible for two people to make love, and I put that in air quotes, without actually entering the 8th house. That might sound strange because I know the 8th house has become associated with sex. But one has to discern, well, okay, what kind of a sex are we talking about here? Because it's possible that a relationship can have a very strongly 8th house tone without ever there being any directly sexual exchange, and vice versa. Two people can be sexually quite engaged or bonded and so on, and there's not an 8th house vibe in sight. So what's the difference? I believe that the difference is with an 8th house kind of experience, there's a real exchange at an energy level, meaning that inevitably the two people involved are transformed by the experience. And transformation isn't a kind of one-shot deal either. A transformational process opens up. And that's the place where many relationships end, actually. Not because they can't hack it, but just because that was the arc of the relationship. It can be as short as one night. If it's got a sexual component, it can last your whole life long. It can be a 5-minute conversation with somebody on a bus. Someone you don't even know their name. You know you're never going to go to bed with this person. But their presence and maybe some little apparently insignificant thing that they said absolutely changed your state, swung you round, set you off, not just for the rest of that hour, but maybe for months or even years ahead, set you off on a different path. And just that contact engaged both people in such a way that certainly one of them in the story was transformed. And it's also possible for people to even be married for many years, maybe their whole life, and have a good relationship. It works well transactionally, it's productive. Perhaps they run a business together, have children together, have a good social life together. And there can be very little eighth house exchange between the two people, because life will bring them eighth house experiences, but in the relationship itself, it's not characterized by an eighth house kind of exchange. Does that make sense to you, Chris?
Totally. Yeah, I'm sitting with it and feeling that, because what you're naming here is, on the one, like two words, two sort of like key words that are in this eighth house as we have a look around, and one is intimacy, and the other is transformation. And you're sort of in a beautiful dance between these two. I'm reminded of the great seer Tiresias, and how he saw these two snakes in a lake, that they were intertwined in each other, and just the seeing of this turned him from a man into a woman, and he lived as a woman for 7 years, and then he saw those same two snakes and intertwined in each other, and it turned him back into a man. So this experience of going transformed and then transformed back, and the sort of mystical undertone to those two snakes, and the entanglement, because intimacy is, it seems to me, to be something where you're never going to be the same, in a sense, right? Like that there's such a deep seeing that there's almost like a merging of cells. And I think that's what's so terrifying about it to the individual, because the individual, at least the ego, has to sort of be overpowered by something much greater than it all of a sudden. And the ego, like, the ego, like the hero, is doing everything it can to avoid that.
Yeah, to kind of shore up the kind of ultimately false sense of unique and individual selfhood.
Exactly. And then it suddenly opens this other world where it says, as you was riffing on before, there isn't one. In the eighth house is like, there isn't an individual, and that's so confronting. It's like we would spend all this time on self-help and self-development, and then the eighth says there isn't one. It's like, oh, how horrible, I don't want to see that. But that's also, the half-truth of it.
Yeah.
So the self is a self, is separate, is individual, and also totally not. I saw you
absolutely
reaching for something.
I just reached for my notepad. I wrote down a quote which I found in Dane Rudhyar's book this morning. His book called I've forgotten the title.
New Mansions for New Men?
New Mansions for New Men. It's that one. Mostly about the houses. And this statement about the eighth house sort of jumped off the page at me. So I wrote it down. So he says, the darkness of selfhood becomes the radiance of love.
Wow.
So that darkness of selfhood is, as I understand it, Chris, that's the kind of thing you were just referring to.
Yeah, exactly. The illusion of separateness.
Yeah.
That is as we've discussed already in the other houses that we've been in, houses like the first and the fifth, even, these houses which even the seventh in a way involves having that separate self really clear, because you can't go into a
Yes.
contract unless you know what you want, right, out of it,
Yeah.
and be ill-advised. Otherwise you'd be taken for a ride. But then all of that gets turned on its head, doesn't it, when we enter this realm and we go into the
Yes.
mulch and we go literally underworld, where all of those,
Exactly.
like we were talking about before, the mycelium network, where everything's being mulched
Yes.
around and one thing's being turned from this into that, underneath it all.
Yeah. Also, astrologically, in the sequence of houses, the eighth house is the first one that has both an ancient and a modern ruler as associated with it. And so our first introduction to the transpersonal world is through Pluto in the eighth house.
Yeah.
I was also just remembering, this is also in one of her books, but I heard a presentation with Pema Chodron, the marvelous Buddhist nun, where it begins in this very direct way, saying, and I'm paraphrasing now, I don't remember the quote verbatim, but she says, people often think that the spiritual journey is like the journey up the mountain. And then she goes on to say, but actually, it's the journey down the mountain to what is below. That also speaks to what you were saying earlier, Chris.
The journey down.
Yeah, the journey down.
And that's an interesting thing, as I've been, reading this book recently. I've talked to you about it before, but Murray Stein's book in Midlife, which has this great other title about Hermes and liminality, but I can't ever remember all of the words that he wanted to name it. I can never actually quote it, but it's amazing. But because midlife is like, Jung said about midlife that that's the time when we need to shift our attention to climbing that mountain, which is like the life attention, and then shift it towards death. And and so in a way, like that quote is like, midlife is like, well, there we are at the top, and it's time to start making our way down now. And contemplate what's down there, what's under this mountain. What else is going on besides this climbing scenario that I've been up to, of gaining things and, status and money and power and whatever it is that I've been up to.
The heroic quest.
Yeah, exactly. Success and, gaining this after that. And this is the process of losing, kind of like in Inanna's story, right? And she begins she has to shed 7 layers of self, ultimately, right, in order to meet Ereshkigal, her dark twin, and come face to face with that side of herself.
Yeah, exactly. And as I recall in that story, at every one of the 7 gates that she has to pass through, well, many of her accoutrements and even clothing are taken off her. And she protests every single time.
Yeah, right.
And the response is, hush, Inanna, the ways of the underworld are perfect and must not be questioned. And so there can be a way where every time we see the door of the 8th house, we go into protest. We don't want to go, but something in the soul knows where we need to go. I was also thinking, as you were talking about beginning to face death, or our mortality is so important in the eighth house, because we do, in the West anyway, we do live in a culture that has almost been defined by its denial of death. Certainly denial about aging. And there's a massive multi-billion industry now of people trying to transform their face, body, everything in order to continue looking young. Or even the behavior that aging people are encouraged to think is a good thing is all modeled on youth and staying young and active and all this kind of thing. And that doesn't necessarily suit everybody. And in some cases, it's just becomes one more mask that people will need to remove if they are to connect with what's really going on.
Yeah.
So that's quite an eighth house thing as well.
Well, it reminds me of a inhabitant of the eighth house, Sisyphus, and how he got to roll the boulder, because we all know Sisyphus is rolling the boulder up the hill and then it gets nearly the top and it rolls back down, and he does that day in, day out. It's come to be a symbol of like the grind and the, you know, when you're doing something over and over again, you never get anywhere. But how did he get there? Well, he chained up death.
Do you know, I'd forgotten that bit about the story.
He chained up death.
Oh, my goodness.
And this is the process of chaining up death, right? I mean, it's death denial. And and because he's chained up death, then the souls just keep living. And then Zeus comes down and is like, what's happening here? You know, this is a disaster, right? And then he finds out that it was Sisyphus. And his punishment for doing that is to be in Tartarus with the boulder day in, day out.
Oh, my
rolling
God.
The boulder up the
I
hill.
had forgotten that bit.
Yeah.
That is awesome.
The chaining up of death. And here we are sort of living out Sisyphus's fate, right? Because we've chained up death. And as much as all of these technologies were meant to free us, apparently, from our toil, no, it has not played out that way.
Yeah. And also, it makes me think of, you know, if we are in a state of eighth house denial about anything, then the meaning in life can get sucked out of what we do.
Exactly.
As labor, which we might normally enjoy, and suddenly it's like, oh, I don't want to do this. And the meaning just drops out of our life.
Because the true punishment of Sisyphus,
like a Sisyphus, you know.
Because actually, the true punishment, and this is why this Greek imagination is so creative and so brilliant, right? But the true punishment is his immortality, isn't it? It's not necessarily that he's rolling the boulder; it's rolling it forever.
Yeah,
he's like, you want to be alive forever? Here's your rock. And you can be alive forever doing this forever.
Yeah. And wow, that's got such a subtlety in it that I'm not sure I ever saw before.
Yeah.
Because, you know, in our mortal selves, in the kind of normal consciousness, if we feel like we want to have eternal life, pretty much we can only hold that image based on something that we already know. And so we get trapped in what we already know and extend it and so on and so forth. But the sense of really totally entering into another world, I'm going to say a spiritual world, well, ultimately that's where the door to the eighth house will lead us, like what Ruja's quote was saying. And, it's the door to the mysteries.
So good.
Thank you for mentioning that story of Sisyphus. Whole chunk there I'd forgotten completely about.
Yeah, the trap, in a way, and I'm thinking about, as you were speaking, I was thinking about form and transformation, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because you were talking about, like, you have to have an image that you would be that forever, right? So what are you going to be forever, kind of thing? And actually, it made me think. Well, form. We think of this in between state as maybe illusionary, but that's the reality, right? The form is illusionary. The form is always temporary, but transformation is always happening.
Yeah.
That's what's always actually going on. We just don't see it because we're sort of granted as human beings, or as things that take form, this ability to stay with this for a while.
Yes, exactly. Exactly right.
And we can look back actually in our lives and go, well, who I was at 3 years old and who I was at 13 and who I was at 28, they're totally different, actually. I've changed form again and again, and I will continue to change form until I change form into the full underworld experience, right? Like until this moves on and something else begins, is what I sort of sense. Because that part, the spirit is around through that whole process. But also there's an evolution, and there's evolving going on, isn't there? Which is another sort of word for the eighth house. Oddly enough, it's an evolution. Like evolutionary astrology focuses on the nodes and Pluto, right? So, in the sense, evolutionary astrology is in the eighth.
Yeah, and almost like the releasing of, or stripping away of, things which are not essential to who we most deeply are, and yet comprise something of an essence that is our true nature.
I think that that's you articulating what I was trying to get at. So thank you for that. It was like the changeless part of the self is actually experienced in the eighth, which is why it's such a like it is blissful. It is it is the experience of like, oh, but then, like Jung talks about getting the gold in the other world and then bringing it back to this world and just having coal in his hands.
Oh, yes.
Because you get it there and you go like, oh my God, I got to go tell everybody. It's like, look, guys, there's gold. And then you reveal the coals in your hands, right? Because it doesn't translate, because the only way, and this is what the ancients, I feel like they discovered long before the Greeks, right? There was a discovery that, oh, you can't just tell the people about the gold there. You have to take them. And that's what the mysteries are. It's like, no, it's not going to work, because once you get it to the upper world, people won't be able to recognize it as gold at all.
Yeah.
They'll just see it as coal. So the only way to show them is to take them.
Yeah. I really feel the resonance of what you're saying now. And also, in a way, it underlines in the eighth house the pre-echo or preparation for the ninth house. Because in a way, if we, on our journey, if we enter the ninth house without having undergone the initiations of the eighth house, it will just be empty proselytizing about things that we haven't really connected with in our depths.
Yeah.
And so ultimately kind of either empty or else stuck at an intellectual level, but having no substance. There's plenty of substance in the eighth house in terms of how we experience something.
And that's taking me back to the image of Sisyphus, who's denying ultimately the eighth. And he doesn't have meaning, right? Like what's robbed is the meaning. And he's going up the hill of the ninth, right?
Oh,
he's making his
like
way up the hill.
Like in Pema Children's lecture. The hill of spiritual aspiration, you know?
Yeah, but he doesn't even reach, he never reaches the summit because that rock just rolls back down and he has to continue to roll it back up. Because ultimately he said no to the eighth. And so saying no to the eighth, as much as that seems like, you know, I mean, the whole culture's, as you said so eloquently, you know, the whole culture is built off of that basically death-denying principle. I mean, that's in some ways the hero is to be denying that, or the hero in the physician to deny that, or, you know, like the project of staying alive can keep us out of that. And if we kept out of the eighth, we can never really enter the ninth, because the only way into the ninth is through the eighth. And the ninth is where we get the meaning and the feeling of
exaltation.
Yes.
Wow.
Like that. I always love that component of the Medusa story that my mind just blanked on what's born from her body. Why is my mind not going to give me this word right now? The Pegasus. Right?
Yes.
So when she loses her head, Medusa, the Pegasus comes from the body, which really feels to me like she went through the most eighth housey of eighth house experiences, Medusa, with the snake hair and all, right? But when she loses her head, what comes from the body is the Pegasus. And that's sort of like one of the ultimate figures for the ninth house, I think.
Yeah, beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that.
Very Jupiterian sort of flying horse.
Yeah.
You know, that and the ability to have the feet on the ground and fly through the sky, right? Like that can be the experience, as you said, exaltation.
Yeah. And it seems to me that the eighth house offers a particular kind of grounding.
Yeah.
It's not grounding as in having enough money in the bank and a place to live, or even grounding your energy in your own body and so on. The eighth house kind of grounding is, we have to find another word for it.
Yeah, we do need another word for that.
There's nothing to do with the physical ground or even the ground of your own body. It's something beyond that, which is like an immersion in the continually unfolding cosmos that actually we're all embedded in. So, in that sense, we lose ourselves to gain our true self.
And I think the word might be something like it's not quite the word, but being ensouled. There's something around that. I don't know what the exact word is, and it'd be interesting if you're listening that word is popping up for you. Please let us know what the word is. It's not grounding, but it's the feeling of being ensouled, right? I mean, that's in essence, I think the eighth house is where you'll find the soul. That's the Catabasis. That's the descent.
Yeah.
And to go there, you need to go in the exact opposite direction of where the society is going and wants you to go.
Yeah.
Unless your society is like a tribe or an ancient culture or something.
Well, almost like the deep sense of belonging and individual relevance and security and all those things that we were searching like crazy for in the fourth house. Well, like, here they are. Come to us in the eighth house. Which may look like, feel like, or be literal, like the loss of what's most cherished and most dear, and the people, places, things, whatever, that matter deeply to us. And we can lose them at any point in our life. And that can be a sudden traumatic loss of unexpected events. But in truth, eventually towards the end of our life, we're going to lose them all anyway. And the eighth house reminds us of that in one way or another. And so I'm just looking at that quote of Rudyard again. Darkness of selfhood becomes the radiance of love. I would like to experiment with that statement and say the darkness of loss becomes the radiance of love.
Yeah.
Or more accurately, perhaps, the darkness of the experience of loss becomes the radiance of love.
Which can have the meaning that I feel in talking about the experience of loss, but it can have another meaning that goes back to Rudyard's statement, in a sense, is the loss of the self, which takes you into true intimacy.
Yes.
The relinquishing, in a way, right? The leaving. It's
Yes.
like you go into that intimate experience and relinquish the self at the door and go in. Not knowing what will happen. I love that quote, and I love what you're doing with it, playing around with it. I feel like there's one thing that before we leave the eighth, it's almost like on a practical level, almost in an eighth house sense, because I've sometimes we can take this information and think, I gotta go to the underworld, and you've already covered this a bit earlier. You're like, nah, it's a call. Like it's not a choice. It can't be done on your own terms. It can't be a control frequency. But I would say that I've found it can be useful to allow the underworld to emerge rather than imagining it as a digging in, a digging down sort of a process.
Yeah.
And I've seen the damage that can happen when people dig around looking for underworld. And I would say finding a way to find that stability or that resourcing at the edge of the underworld is often enough. And then what can happen then is just that it emerges from there. Like there's there's a bubbling up from the bottom of the lake kind of thing, process that happens there. Or you're waiting there and Hermes may come and take you. But what it isn't is a digging around, because there can be a way that we kind of are violent with our experiences of the underworld. We really want to go in there and uncover every demon and like just, get the spade out. And it's like, I just want to mention that as and I'd love your thoughts and reflections on eighth house in that way.
Well, I love what you just said, Chris. And I really think it's very important because there's something about the quality of acceptance that the eighth house pretty much demands. And we maybe start off not accepting, as we've mentioned in several ways. But if we go into heroic mode, we want to like overcome our experiences of the eighth house. Or, that people are often not granted by the collective mind sufficient time to process actual losses. A parent dies, a partner dies, and people feel the expectation often that they have to be like back on their feet and back at the office within a couple of weeks. And that just may not be enough time. And the flip side of that is when we know there's a strong process needing to go on. And so we get the spade out, as Chris just said, and we start digging and digging.
Yeah.
And that's not the same as a gentle process of inquiry.
Yeah.
Which is a very subtle kind of a penetration, I'm going to say. Penetration into our experience, fueled by curiosity.
Yeah.
Not by a desire to overcome and fix it and all of that.
Yeah.
So I love how you described that, Chris. And what came to mind as you were talking was the title of your podcast series, On the Soul's
yes,
Terms.
Exactly.
Right?
Thank you, Melanie. Exactly. Yes, on the soul's terms. It's not on the terms of the ego. It's not even on the terms of the spirit. It's on the terms of the soul. And I'm glad that we've gone there to that particular place, because I find that it could be hard for people. Like people put themselves through unnecessary torture and torment, thinking that they're doing some good deep work. And while we've said a lot about the death denying and the staying out of the eighth house and things, there's also like a digging into the eighth that's equally a negative experience, maybe even more so. That sort of constant shadow work or something like that. And it's like, no, the experience of the eighth is, just as you said, a gentle inquiry, an inquisitive, curious mind, and a gently going to places, and then having faith in those places, that they are intelligent places. The rules of this upper world won't apply there, so there's really no point. Even Hercules has to, his weapons don't work down there, like you got to leave your weapons, just leave them. They're not going to be useful anyway, and then just go, And there's probably, other mythic ways if you look at the fourth task of Psyche, that's a really good one of, don't save the drowning man, don't accept the role of the fates. There's things to not do. But as far as what to do, I don't know, that's going to depend on what your eighth house feels like and looks like, and your own immersion in that and your own interaction with it.
Yeah.
I mean, even Psyche has to give the gold coin, right? And that could be the self there. she's got to give that to the ferryman, Charon.
Mm.
Leave that. And then away you go. And yeah, it's that link that you're referring to the ninth as well. And just to come back to that is a nice place to sort of round out. I think that the ninth is that house of high learning, meaning making, all of that. And it's the next house. It's the next one along after the eighth. And you can't jump from the seventh.
Transcendence in a way.
Transcendence, yeah. You can't jump over it. They sort of try to make the leap from the seventh.
Yes.
Yeah. Beautiful. Yet again, a beautiful conversation, so soulful and rich, Melanie. And I'm looking around at all those things that we haven't picked up.
For me too.
Yeah, oh, good. I'm looking at all the things we haven't picked up in this house. It's like, there's always going to be more. And that's the joy of it and also the agony of it. Like, we could go so many more places. But
yes, exactly.
Eventually we have to pack up our things and make our way back out, having eaten just a few seeds of the pomegranate, so we know that we're residents down here now.
Yeah. Love that.
Yeah. Well, thank you again, not just from me, but all the listeners are thanking you. I can hear them in my ear. I have a special link to them, and they're thanking you. Not just for this, but for the 4th house episode that we did together and those other episodes. If you haven't listened to Melanie and I chat on the podcast, I would go back all the way to our very first discussion, which it was around midnight for me because I needed to catch you in your time in the UK, and I was in that midnight zone, which was so great. It was like so otherworldly. And each of our conversations have been really enriching, and you've brought so much to the show. So thank you, Melanie, for bringing so much of yourself to On the Soul's Terms.
Well, thank you. A total pleasure as always, Chris. Thanks.
Thank you for listening to On the Soul's Terms podcast. To support the show, please consider leaving a 5-star review, sharing with friends, or becoming a patron at patreon.com/onthesoulsterms. Until next time.